Hello, I'm your host, Mike Gelb, and this is the Consumer VC podcast, where we discuss the intersection of venture capital and consumer innovation. If you're enjoying the show, also subscribe to my newsletter at theconsumervc.com, where you'll receive all new episodes straight to your inbox, plus a weekly recap of all consumer deals that are happening. All content episodes are for informational and entertainment purposes only and is not investment advice. Before we get into today's episode, I want to tell you about aVenture, a new platform that's about to launch that's making venture capital available to the masses. It doesn't matter if you're accredited or non-accredited, aVenture provides an opportunity to diversify your investment portfolio and invest in private funds. If you're a fund manager, the aVenture app also provides everything you need in order to make startup investments, including extensive research materials, seamless transaction processes, and allocation measures so you can properly diversify your portfolio. Now, typically, venture capital and startup investments are liquid, which is a major pain point for industry. aVenture is fixing this by offering periodic withdrawals for its investors. I and many others in this industry are so excited about this launch. They are preparing to list their first fund in the beginning of next year. So if you want to be the first to know, join their waitlist at aventure.vc. Our guest today is Mike Fata, who is the founder of Manitoba Hemp Foods and was acquired for 9 figures by Tilray in 2019. Now, he's an investor, coach, writer, and author of Grow, 12 Unconventional Lessons for Becoming an Unstoppable Entrepreneur, which will be released on March 29th, 2023. You can pre-order it on Amazon. Link is in the show notes. We discuss dropping out of high school, his health journey, how he founded and scaled Manitoba, how he thinks about investing today in better for you products, and his role in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Without further ado, here's Mike. Mike, thank you so much for taking the time. How are you?
Doing well, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. So I want to start from the very beginning. You dropped out of high school when you were 13. What was the reason? What was your first job after you dropped out? Well, I'd be kind of hear that story.
Yeah, I was always a smart kid in school, and but by the time I hit like junior high, I was getting in trouble more than the average kid, just because I was bored. And going into high school, it was just such a social club. I was overweight. I was the nerdy kid. I just didn't fit in, and I didn't want to go. So I told my mom I didn't want to go to school, and she said, if you don't go to school, you got to get a job. And I was like, that sounds like a done deal. And so I started working construction and some heavy labor jobs, and I did that for 5 or 6 years, from carpentry, asphalt, concrete, and all of that kind of before I got into business.
So how did you then get into nutrition, going from, I guess, construction to understanding nutrition? I know also at one point you weighed over 300 pounds. How did you also, when was also like the period that you decided to take, your own personal nutrition, kind of go on that journey?
Yeah. Yeah. I hit, when I was 18 years old, I hit 300 pounds. Was sick and tired all the time. Wanted a girlfriend that wasn't just friends. And those were kind of the two big catalysts. And then I started my weight loss journey, and it took about 3 years to lose the weight. And through that time, I was training in the gym. I was reading all these nutrition books and just getting more and more educated about things that I had no clue before that. How the body worked, how critical nutrition was, cleansing, different diet protocols, and so from 18 to 21 was kind of that metamorphosis stage for me, and came out as a 21-year-old in great shape after losing the weight, and really interested in health, and then got into the hemp food business.
So is that, once you lost the weight, is that when you decided to start a CPG brand or got interested in actually being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, yeah, and part of the weight loss, as I was experimenting on myself, one of the things was, I got into the fad diet of the no fat diet, which was popular in the mid 1990s, and so I learned the hard way about how essential fatty acids are, omega 3 and omega 6, and had read a book, Fats That Heal, Fats That Kill, Dr. Udo Rasmus, that mentioned, not only are they essential, but what are the best sources, and that's where I learned about hemp, from a nutrition standpoint. I always thought hemp was cool, but when I learned that it was one of the richest sources of omega-3 and omega-6, I just saw things were going to change from the no fat diet to the right fat diet, and hemp could be a valuable product. And I just got super passionate about it and wanted to get into the business.
What was because hemp at this time, it wasn't exactly legal in Canada, right?
That was the first year when I got into the business, was the first year that hemp was legalized in Canada.
Did you sense that there was going to be kind of a gold rush that was happening into hemp, or and also why did Canada what I guess was the negative around hemp like previously, I guess, just in general people's minds.
Yeah, hemp and cannabis, hemp and marijuana are both in the cannabis family of plants. So, for many years, like hemp was outlawed in Canada for 50 years, in the U.S. for 60 some odd years, because of the confusion with marijuana. And so even after it was legalized, hemp was legalized in Canada. From all these legacy misinformation campaigns, a lot of consumers were confused. That you said, I said, "Hey, we're selling hemp seed." People would hear, "Oh, you're selling marijuana. Can you get high?" And so it, even though it was legal, I don't know. I didn't feel so much going after a gold rush. I didn't know anything about. I knew some things about working and being in business, but I didn't know anything about entrepreneurship. It was all self-learned. I was just super passionate about health, and so I became passionate about hemp foods, and I wanted to talk about it all the time and learn more about it and solve the problems of how do we make this quality product and get it out to people.
So hemp was a big part of your journey when it came to your weight loss journey and getting, healthy, getting right, from that standpoint. What but I know that you as you mentioned, like, you came from a construction background. What was kind of the first step for you starting, this hemp business? How did you think about even formulation, getting the supply chain right? What was kind of going through your mind at that point?
Yeah. Um, so there's two other co-founders of Manitoba Harvest, Martin and Alex, and they had worked to get hemp legal, and so three of us came together. And I would say I brought more of the passion of the consumer and the opportunity with the consumer, and they had some resources already on supply chain, growing the first hemp field. But learned everything from hemp seed oil was our first product, and we did a bottling run of a couple hundred bottles of hemp seed oil, and I learned about how you press hemp seed oil and how you put it into a bottle. I'd seen, and because I was hanging out in health food stores and eating healthier, what flax seed oil was, and some of the other essential fatty acid rich oils. So we're taking some of the marketing from that and repurposing it. But literally started with one health food store. And sold the owner the product and demoed in that store to sell it, and then we went to our first consumer show to talk to 1,000 consumers over the weekend and sold a couple hundred bottles of hemp oil. And then after that show, I thought, okay, after being in front of a large audience like that, we have something here. I think if we keep on replicating that, there could be millions of customers.
So what was then when you realized, okay, we just sold 200 bottles. This is incredible. There is something here. It seems like this is not only that, is this good for you and a great product from that standpoint, but there also is legitimate demand here from the consumer, even if it's, very, very early. What was kind of the next steps? Like, how were you able to get into retail and also convincing, retail buyers that, hey, actually, like, hemp is going to be big. This is what we're doing with our hemp oil product, and kind of how did you um say kind of say that you had, list off, I guess, like the traction that you needed to.
Yeah. Yeah, there's actually a whole chapter in my book on this, because that show that we were at, whether you call it luck or just being in the right place at the right time, not only did we sell several hundred bottles of hemp oil that weekend and validated, hey, there's an interest here. Vita Health, which was a chain of 7 stores in my home market here, was at the show, and the owner literally his booth was right beside this little table that we had, and he came over and said, "Hey, all my customers are coming over and saying that they just bought a bottle of hemp oil from you. We need to have this in the store." And so we went from one health food store across the street from my mom's place that I was selling to, all of a sudden to our first chain of 7 stores. But not only that, John Holtman, the owner of the store, became interested in the product, and he became a mentor of mine, and helped me understand what the structure of the industry looked like, the distribution and the market, and how many retailers, and so he and also became one of our first shareholders when we raised some capital. And so it just putting myself out there in that right time and right place, delivered not only the consumer but our next level of customers as well.
How also did you approach when you started getting to trade shows? And how I remember reading, I think something on LinkedIn that you posted about how you're always hustling at trade shows, and also like what maybe entrepreneurs maybe are getting wrong when it comes to trade shows. How did you approach them back in the early days? Why did you think maybe your approach, how it actually became very successful?
Yeah. I think the number one that I've learned, and I tell all entrepreneurs, just be yourself. Don't. My learning was the first trade show that I went to, not the consumer show, but the actual trade. I wore a suit. Okay, and I wore a suit because I thought, oh, we're going to do business, so we should wear a suit there. And quickly, I had several people tell me, "What are you doing wearing a suit?" And I was like, "Oh, well, I'm 21 year old. I'm like, I'm here to do business." And they're like, "You're the hemp guy," and so that from then on, I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to dress more, professional, but dress myself, and we actually took the business into more of a sports casual branding of what we would wear. But I tell people, be yourself, because if you're just yourself and you're there sharing your positive vibe, sharing your product, sharing your messaging, the right people for you, the right community is going to form around you. It really is a volume game from there. The more you put yourself out, the more trade shows you go to, the more conversations you have, you're going to develop that community. But it has to start with you being authentically yourself, not trying to be someone else, or trying to look a certain way or dress a certain part.
How also did you, I guess, attract people? Because of course, at trade shows there's so many booths, there's so many, people obviously. But how did you attract people to your booth? And how did you feel, what do you think that was like successful about your proposition to potential buyers, maybe investors, other people that, could be partners along the way, that you think, what, we actually did really well in this particular right here.
Yeah, the great thing about hemp is that hemp has always had a mystique to it. Whether it was because people were, it was a relative of marijuana, or it was, illegal and taboo for so many years. There definitely was a mystique that drew people in. Um, so that was working for us. But besides that, we were just being really bold. We were putting ourselves out there. I would we'd be out in the aisle, not just in our booth, right, and drawing people in and talking to people. Hey, come and try the product. I guarantee you like it. Come and try a shot of hemp seed oil, and learn all about it. And then from there, also getting involved, whatever that organization was, whether it was the Canadian Health Food Association trade show, or the Natural Products Expo, or a specialty food show. We would get involved with the show itself, and like, where can we go to for the networking event that they have, and can we enter ourselves into awards that they're holding, and like, be more a part of the community than just show up there and be in a trade show booth. And that's really has worked for us as we continue to grow the business over 2 decades, was just be more and more a part of the community.
How also did you approach the kind of customer education side to hemp oil? Because, as we started this conversation, hemp was, legalized very soon after you started. And so maybe people didn't really understand. They just thought about like the negative kind of connotation to hemp being, associate or part of the marijuana family. But how did you approach kind of the customer education that actually this is a very nutritious food that actually could really help you?
Yeah, a lot of our marketing was, in the early days, was more. informational marketing because we realized we did have to educate the consumers and the trade, and so started on a black and white brochure that we printed on our office printer, explaining exactly what hemp was, and what it wasn't. Its relation to marijuana, but it had no psychoactive drug to it, and then the nutritional properties of the oils, and then also the fats and the protein. And then we put little comparison charts of like how hemp oil compared to flaxseed oil and other oils, and the same thing with like how hemp hearts, how much protein it had compared to meat or other nuts and seeds, and so it created not only the education, but the sense of familiarity to the marketplace, and I think that's really has helped us out.
What was like, you don't have to mention the name, but what was like the hardest, I guess, retailer in Canada to, I guess, convince that this was a trend, that this was why it actually made sense to sell your products in the store?
I'm not shy to say it because it's the largest retailer in Canada, but Loblaws, under their number of banners they have, because they have more than 1,000 stores, was definitely the hardest retailer for us to penetrate, and our strategy and tactics were more guerrilla marketing style. So at that point, we were doing consumer health shows. So going over the weekend and sampling right to consumers and selling our product there. We armed, and for a good focus of like a year and a half, over probably 12 or 15 shows across Canada in the different major cities, we would tell consumers like, after they bought our products and they loved, they learned all about the brand, they bought our products, and would leave there with a kit of our products. We would give them extra brochures and say, go into your local Loblaws store and tell the health food store set manager there, give them one of our brochures and tell them that they need to sell this product. So we're just doing this, right? And time goes on and time goes on. But what happened is one day we got a call from Loblaws. They called us, the head office called us and said, hey, all of our set managers from like 50 different stores are saying that they're getting consumers coming into the store asking for your product. So we need to sell your product. And at that time, as crazy as this is, um, because it's very expensive to do business with a retailer like that. They didn't even charge us listing fees because we had the demand in. So, I don't know if that tactic still would work nowadays in the same way, but that was our approach, and it was really like a consumer demand first, and then and help to penetrate that retailer.
And were you, since you that's a really, really cool tactic. Were you able to satisfy that demand once you were in the actual stores across Canada?
Yeah, we because we set up our business as a vertically integrated business where we controlled the farming of the farming of the crop of the hemp seed, and we own the manufacturing facility. Um, it was about controlled growth. The more stores we went into, the more products we created. We had to make sure that our facility was expanded. But over the 20 years, we built four different facilities, and some of those facilities went through two or three expansions. So it was kind of like a continual expansion. We'd be like, oh, we're listening to this new retailer. We need to make sure that we put more capacity on our packaging line or our production line, or growing more acreage of hemp. But we were in control of the whole process, so it was all taken into consideration when we were strategically planning.
So why were you vertically integrated from the get go? Is this because it was such a new category, it just became legalized, that there wasn't any infrastructure already when it came to the supply chain?
Yeah. Well, it sounds genius, and I talk about it a lot now, saying like vertically integrated or controlling the process. I'm bullish on manufacturing stuff. The straight answer at that point, Mike, was that no one else wanted to do it. We couldn't convince someone else to make it, and so we were like, okay, well, we're going to make it ourselves, and we had some resources like the food development center, so government assisted facilities. You can go in there and rent equipment or learn about manufacturing process. So we had we had some of that as a resource, but yeah, it was only a couple of years into the business that I learned, oh, this is going to be a real strength of ours, because we learn more about the hemp seed, right from farm gate right through to that consumer package than anyone else did, and that's one of the strengths of why Manitoba Harvest became the most valuable hemp food company in the world, by far, like by 20 or 50x compared to the next company.
And there was never any thought after at the beginning, hey, no one wants to produce it. Okay, we'll just produce it ourselves. There's never a thought along your journey as you're growing, as you're doing very, very well. There was never thought to almost sell off that side, that part of the business, and actually then not become vertically integrated, right?
No, there wasn't. The only thing that when we got ourselves a couple times over the years, call it a little more pinched, was because we had invested in an expansion of the facility, and then something happened in the marketing or sales that weren't. We always were growing, but some years we wouldn't grow as fast. Like if we look back at the whole life cycle of the business, we had a 50% year over year CAGR, so compounded annual growth of 50%. But some of those years we grew, only 10%, and then the next year we grow 100%. Well, in the years we grew 10%, but we had just made major investments in the facility. But not so much the question of selling it off, but we asked ourselves the question: do we need to be producing other things? Do we need to be producing like flax oil or other products outside of just hemp? Are we going to be able to scale this business enough, continuing to be a 100% focus on hemp foods? And so we tested that strategy, and I'm glad that we learned, and we kept the approach of, no, let's 100% be all things hemp, and because that's really what worked out for us strategically in the long run.
When you talk to founders, how do you, because it seems like that is a really cool, well, not really cool, but a interesting crossroads to be in, right? You have all this manufacturing, you have these manufacturing facilities, you've obviously invested and put a lot of capex into these manufacturing facilities. And can it do they does it actually make sense to all be devoted to hemp, or should you also introduce other products just so you can operate at full capacity? When you think about these kind of questions, and then you decide to focus all on hemp, as you're advising and investing in companies, how do you kind of advise companies about how to actually focus when it comes to SKUs, when it comes to products that they should be producing?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, it's all about scale, right? And scale is a little different for every business. But you need scale to be successful. You need scale to be successful in manufacturing. You need scale usually from a product standpoint to have the right gross margin. And scale is you need depth to have scale. So the opposite of that is if you're going too wide. So what I see is great companies that only have one or two or three products, and they've established themselves, and they have a meaningful amount of sales from that. There's a huge amount of opportunity to continue to focus and get distribution growth, and before they innovate anything else. And where I see entrepreneurs that I would likely that it's not a right investment fit for me, but I would mentor or coach them in, if they had like 10 products that they produced already, but they're doing less than $1 million in sales. It's or they're in 1,000 retailers, and they're doing less than $1 million in sales. You could say you have more risk of in the future of growth, because you're not very focused, you're not very scalable, and sometimes even businesses that are small yet have to retrench and discontinue some of their SKUs, which may even make their sales lower. Like sometimes you have to go from $1 million of such a wide SKU assortment and distribution, discontinue some of that, go down to like five or six or $700,000 to grow back up. And obviously the same is true, and even more true in larger businesses. But I see a lot of younger entrepreneurs, more in startup mode, struggling from that.
So it's better to have also, I guess, from a kind of distribution curve when it comes to sales, it's much better to have like one or two kind of hit products that are doing kind of well, that are that most of your revenue are earning from one or two products, rather than that to be kind of more evenly distributed among SKUs. Is that roughly right too?
Yeah, like it, and that in CPG, that the term of be an inch wide, a mile deep. If you have one product that you're selling in 100 stores, and the velocity is so strong in those stores, you're always going to have a chance to go and get distribution in the next 100 stores or next 1,000 stores. And if that one product is selling so strong, your retailer partners are going to give you a chance to put a second SKU on the shelf, or a third SKU. But the opposite is true as well. If you have too many SKUs in a store, and none of them are selling well, like they're not hitting the velocity that your retailer partner is expecting, you're just waiting the time to discontinuation. And as soon as you start getting discontinued products in retailers, it really hurts your brand. It makes it hard to go and grow and establish more distribution from there. So yeah, just focus on one good thing that you're known for, or just a couple of products. Focus in your local market first to establish a strong velocity in the stores that you're selling to, and then plan your expansion out from there.
Yeah, because then as well, if you have one product that's doing, extremely well, instead of maybe four products that, add up to one, kind of like the sales of that one product, is that you kind of have more of a sure bet as well with retailers, and so they're a lot more open to I'm sure bringing it into your stores, only releasing maybe one product to start with, because it's performing so well. Whether as four, that's then 4 or 5 or 10 or whatever it is, that's then a lot more to manage, and you don't quite know. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and one of the things I always talk to younger entrepreneurs about that are just getting into the CPG space, or just even really starting to scale their business in the CPG space, is understand the product that you're making, what the expectation is of the retailer in the category for what the sales per week are of that. And it's different in every category, right? Whether you're making a coffee or tea product, or you're making a chocolate bar, or you're a non-dairy milk, you need to understand, is the non-dairy milk, is that category, that shelf in the store, is the retailer expecting you to sell 12 units of your product per week in each one of their stores, or is it 6 units per week? What's their expectation of the category? And big businesses buy data for this, and are pretty sophisticated. But when you're small, another reason why to focus on a local market is because you can go in there and ask the retailer, ask the manager of the store, what's your expectation? I'm selling this oat milk. What's your expectation? Oh, well, if you sell 6 of those a week, that's good. That'll keep up with the rest of the category. Then you can have something to focus on. Because if you're only selling 3 a week, and the expectation is 6 a week, you're in trouble, right? Like, if you don't get the number up to 6, you're gonna get discoed when a new product comes in that is promising to do better than yours. So having that understanding, and I think that's the trap, is like, you have entrepreneurs that are selling only 2 or 3 units a week when they need to be selling 6, and they're going and getting distribution in new stores, instead of focusing on that store to get the velocity up. And that's just the wrong use of their working capital.
I think that's a great point, in that because you might have benchmarks for yourself in terms of how much you want to sell per year, or maybe monthly or whatever it is, but actually talking to a retailer and saying, okay, what's actually the benchmark, or like the average for, this particular category, like what's actually good to you, then that actually, sets your expectations up as well, too, or where do you actually need to be. And as you say, if you don't meet that mark, you might be at risk of getting discontinued. And so kind of understanding and knowing those benchmarks from the retailer, like that's incredibly valuable.
Yeah, and my strategy is usually, and it's worked for us, and I tell a lot of entrepreneurs this, is that I want to have an understanding what the retailer thinks the category should be selling, and I want to sell 25% more. So, if the retailer is telling you that they want to sell 10 units per week per store of that SKU, I want to be selling 12 of our product, because if you're doing better than the category, everyone's going to be happy. Your retail partner, you're going to be a gold star, and guess what? When he goes and talks to his retail partner friends, he's going to be like, "Oh, you got to have this product." Like, one of a portfolio companies, Midday Squares, has just done an incredible job of it. They're now the best selling SKU of chocolate in the functional chocolate set, the refrigerated snacking set. So when they want to go and expand distribution, you're like, it's an easy sell. You're selling more velocity than any other bar in that set. Every retailer is going to give you a shot from there. But if you don't have an understanding of what the expectation is of how much you're supposed to be selling, you don't have a target in the first place.
And also probably too, not only for a retail expansion, but probably you're also going to get maybe better placement at that retailer, right? Oh, you're doing quite well selling this amount. What if we give you, better placement in our store, in terms of on the shelf, or an end cap, or whatever it is, and then see how you perform, because maybe we have a winner here, and maybe our placement though for you initially, because you just got into it, wasn't so great. So yeah. With Manitoba Harvest, when did you decide to expand to the United States? How many stores were you in Canada, and like What was that process like going from Canada to the US?
We expanded too soon, but uh, the timing was very different. So we started the business in 1998, and then we launched in the U.S. in 2000. Started shipping to the U.S. in 2000. Really did our launch in the U.S. in 2001. But we were only at that time like $500,000 in sales. We had no, for every business case and every entrepreneur I talk to nowadays, I was like, do not expand. You're still in your local market territory to prove success for this business. But I thought we had to go where the customers were, and that there was interest in hemp. But it's just it's a different business. The regulatory concerns, the labeling is different, the distribution is different, the retail margins and promotional strategies and expectations are different, and so it makes it more complex. So a lot of Canadians will think, oh, I got to get into Whole Foods in the U.S. That's going to be success for me. But if you're not ready, if you're not prepared, you're gonna lose more than you're gonna gain from a timing. So I wouldn't recommend the approach that we did, and nowadays, and the portfolio of companies and the coaching and mentoring I do. It's the exact opposite. Like build a strong home market first, wherever your home market is. Even if you're in the U.S., like if you're in California, build California. Don't think you're going to be going and you should be shipping into the Northeast before you've really capitalized on how big the market can be for you in your local state.
What's a stronghold market, would you say, for Canada? Like, how many, if you're advising a company that's Canadian and they're doing pretty well, what to you, when you realize, okay, you have a very strong home market, like how many stores do you think roughly they should be in, revenue numbers, but then it might make sense to go into the US or just expand to another market?
I think that and I'm in Winnipeg, right? So I'm not in a huge market here. There's like a million people that live in Winnipeg, but Toronto, Montreal, or Vancouver, in those markets, you should be able to get your first $1 million in sales in your local city, like literally, a couple hundred kilometers or miles from your home office or your house. And if you could do that and prove that kind of success first, then you could probably establish yourself as like a $5 million brand in Canada. And I don't think that before you expand anywhere else. And so I don't think that people should be going from Canada to the U.S. or from one market to the other unless they're like a 5 going on $10 million business, because you're just gonna you're gonna diversify your resources where you wanna intensify your focus, is the way to quicker success. So that's the thought. Unless it's a low cost risk, right? Like you're selling maybe to an online retailer like Amazon, and so you don't have all the challenges of brick and mortar retail and distribution in another state and product going short dated on a shelf in Nebraska, and you can't do anything about it. That's the right approach.
No, that's helpful. So kind of that $1 million sales mark per se in local city. Obviously, it depends how large that city is, but reaching that kind of $1 million mark in the local city, then you can maybe look to expand to maybe another city. Like if you hit like $1 million in Toronto, then maybe you look to expand to Montreal.
Yeah, and to your point there of like how many retailers, I love seeing like if you have for your first $1 million, I think there's two things. What's your minimum viable community that you need to get to that $1 million? And I like to think about it as probably about 10,000 consumers in your community, because on average, buying $100 a year is going to get you your $1 million. And that probably you only need a network of maybe 100 or a couple hundred stores really selling good velocity to be able to reach that many consumers. And so if you've built that density in your home market, you have all the opportunity to expand from there.
With all this being said, what's your approach? Because I know that you obviously invest in many CPG companies like Midday Squares, who've had on the show and are fantastic.
Yeah, so it starts with product first. I have to personally love the product, and consume the product in my house, as a routine. So it starts with that, and sometimes I like actually discovering the product in store, and having it in my house, and getting in routine with that. Sometimes before meeting the founder, and then from meeting the founder. It's also someone that I want to hang out with, someone that I'd want to have at my house, have over for dinner, actually enjoy hanging out with. Those two, the product and founder, are critical to even get my foot in the door to analyze the business. From there, it's typical from an investment standpoint, like what's the growth, the trajectory and opportunity for the business, what's the gross margin structure, is it defendable, are they manufacturing and they have some moats to defend that, how's gross margin looking, and then from their investment that they've had to date and the structure of their cap table, and that kind of opportunity for me to step in and really add value, not only with a potential investment, but with strategy and advising the founders, or being on the board to help with their strategic planning and growth from there.
When you think about growth and growth projections, there's a number of products that are quite successful and do really well in the natural channels that are, obviously better for you, but very few are able to kind of cross that chasm and get into conventional grocery. How is that part of your when you're analyzing products? I mean, I know obviously it seems like you have to love it, you have to love the product, you have to love the founders, but how are you also analyzing from that perspective of, all right, will this work in conventional grocery? What actually needs to be true in order to work in conventional grocery? I'll kind of stop right there.
Yeah, yeah, and if you look at my portfolio, I'm more of a venture investor, not an angel investor. So I want to establish a business, and usually the business is doing $5 million or north of $5 million in revenue already before I'm going to invest. Usually, not all the time, but usually. And so they already probably have some tests in grocery, and there's some data on how the brand is doing. At the same time, as an entrepreneur that's been in the natural product space for 25 years, I understand the omni-channel approach. Like, things are changing where more and more grocery retailers are putting larger and larger sections of their store to natural, organic, better for you, healthier product, and so it's probably, to go back to your question directly, it's the density that they've created in the retailers that they're selling in already will give a good will give some good analysis to what the growth potential is there in a larger universe of retailers.
Got it. So just looking at what, like how much velocity they're actually doing in their actual, kind of, in the natural channels, and then, if that, and then I guess they can really paint a very compelling story to actually get them in conventional.
Yeah, exactly.
Going back to Manitoba, I mean, your first liquidity event happened when you had sales roughly over 100 million. Why did it happen? Why do you think it was right to do a liquidity event? What was the reason?
Yeah, well, we had two liquidity events actually. The first one, in 2015, the business was doing about 50 million in sales, and we had venture capital investments in the business that had already been in the company, invested for 5 or 6 years, and they were getting to the end of the life cycle of their fund, and so they were one of the drivers of, hey, is now the time to sell the business or look for the next partner. And so we did a formal auction process, and did sell majority to a private equity sponsor partner, and that gave us a tremendous amount of new capital into the business, which we used to acquire Hemp Oil Canada, our biggest competitor, like 6 months after that, and then really establish ourselves as the true global leader in hemp foods, with 2 manufacturing facilities, a team of over 200 people, and then just kept growing. And then 3 years later, we had sales of about $100 million, and that's when we decided to sell the business. More so than because of the timing was just perfect. Like, the Canada had just legalized recreational cannabis, so the excitement on cannabis altogether was really high. You had all these recreational cannabis companies, that had huge balance sheets because they were publicly traded companies, had a lot of cash on their balance sheet, and were looking for all things cannabis, even, including the non-regulated hemp foods. And so we saw the opportunity there. At the same time, the U.S. legalized hemp and finally opened up the commercial farming operations for hemp. So timing was just super right in 2019, and so we performed the transaction with Tilray and sold the business for $419 million to Tilray.
Incredible. I mean, congratulations on just that's amazing. That's amazing.
Timing's everything, Mike. Yeah, no, I've seen people, friends go, have great businesses, but just miss the timing and kind of go over the waterfalls, and then they lose a tremendous amount of value, or lose the opportunity to sell the business or get the right partner on, just because they missed the timing. Same could be true even if someone looks at, my latest transaction with Soul Cuisine that we sold a year ago. In the Soul Cuisine is one of the legacy companies in the plant-based protein space in Canada. The market was so hot for plant-based protein foods, and we had the ability to sell that business for $125 million cash, which was 5 times sales. But it's just because timing was so right. It was a great business and great products, but timing was so right. If you look now, it's a different marketplace for all these plant-based food companies, whether they're publicly traded or private. So entrepreneurs should always be thinking about timing, especially when they're really growing a business to scale and looking for liquidity opportunities.
No, that's a really great point. I remember talking to a person how he sold his business, a few years after Prime, and he said, I could have got it for a lot more and had a lot more successful exit if I sold earlier, and kind of kicking myself. So, and I imagine 2019 was a pretty good time to sell a business, not so much probably right at this moment in time. What's one book that's inspired you personally, and one book that's inspired you professionally?
I like probably a mix. I mean, Tim Ferriss. I'm a big fan of Tim Ferriss. The 4 Hour Work Week has been one that probably both personally and professionally has hit me. Only because I used to think, and part of how I grew up on like working construction and then starting a business, I thought you always had to work really hard, like sacrifice and work hard, and I'm a hard worker, and I do, I do even now I love grinding weeks where I'm creating new things. But I've learned through some of the philosophy and some of the example that you don't have to kill yourself. You can get into intense amounts of deep work, and still have a balanced lifestyle, and even be a more successful entrepreneur and person, family life and stuff.
Yeah, really glad that you brought that book. So that's a great one. Mike, this has been so much fun. Thanks again for your time.
Yeah. Well, I should have mentioned, the if I can, Mike,
Yeah, of course.
my book that I've been writing for the last year and a bit, Grow, 12 Unconventional Lessons for Becoming an Unstoppable Entrepreneur, drops in March. So hoping people pick up a copy of that. It'll be it'll be good tools and some strategies and tactics that I think will impact a lot of entrepreneurs.
I'm excited to read it, Mike. It should be that's great. That's great. We're really excited to read it and learn further from you. Really appreciate it. Well, Mike, this has been so much fun. Thanks again for your time.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
And there you have it. It was such a pleasure chatting with Mike. I really appreciate him coming on the show and stopping by. I highly recommend pre-ordering or ordering his book, depending on when you are listening to this episode, on Amazon. Thanks for listening, folks.